I'll call this meeting of the Housing and Redevelopment Authority of June 17th, 2024. I will call it to open. And this brings us to our open forum. The open forum is an opportunity for each speaker, for speakers to address the HRA on any issue they would like to. Each speaker is to keep their comments period to 3 minutes to allow for sufficient time for others. Comments are an opportunity to address the HRA. Please refer to the HRA agenda and minutes webpage for additional ways to submit comments. Call into the open forum. You may call into the open forum by dialing 1-415-655-0001 and use webinar access code 2634-736-3238 and password 1234. Do we have any callers? Okay. And I don't see anyone approaching the podium here in the chambers tonight. So if anyone does call, let us know and we will make time. And that brings us to the approval of the minutes of the regular Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting of May 20th, 2024.
I'll move approval.
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. And I will entertain a motion for approval of the agenda, or if anyone has any revisions they want to suggest.
I move approval of the agenda.
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, well that will bring us to staff report number 12.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. I will ask Assistant Community Development Director Julie Urban to present the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Hansen, members of the HRA. Johnny O'Para with J.O. Companies, LLC, is proposing to develop 40 units of affordable housing on Housing and Redevelopment Authority-owned property located at 6501 and 6525 Penn Avenue South. The development would include a 5-story building with 34 underground and 14 surface parking spaces. The affordability mix would include 15 units affordable to households earning up to 30% of the area median income, 18 units affordable at 50% of the AMI, and 7 units affordable at 60% of the AMI. 2 units will be accessible with roll-in showers. The developer is seeking approval of a preliminary development agreement with the HRA. Under the terms of the agreement, the HRA would agree to work with the developer to consider financial assistance in the amount of up to $985,000 in the form of a grant or loan from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and or a reduced price for the land. Under the terms of the agreement, we would also agree to not negotiate with any other parties with respect to selling the HRA-owned property, and would grant the developer a right of entry for activities such as environmental testing. And finally, the agreements would have the HRA support and cooperate with the developer as he applies for additional funding. The developer is planning to submit an application to the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency for federal low-income housing tax credits and other assistance in order to finance the development. A commitment from the HRA to sell the property at a reduced rate and to provide additional financial assistance will make the development more competitive for an award for tax credits and is necessary before the application deadline of July 11th. Decisions regarding tax credits are anticipated in December of this year. Ellers, the city's financial consultant, has reviewed the developer's proposed pro forma and determined that a gap of $985,000 exists and can be filled with HRA resources in the form of an award from the trust fund and or a reduced land price. And I would add that Ellers did confirm that the project meets industry standards for a tax credit development. They take a look at it and compare it to what is standard in the metro area for a tax credit proposal. The HRA purchased the property at 6501 Penn in 2019 and has submitted funds to Hennepin County to purchase the tax forfeited property located at 6525 Penn Avenue South. A deed to that property is anticipated by the end of June. That ends my report. The developer here is here as well if you have some questions for him. Otherwise, I am also open for any questions. Thank you.
All right, any questions for the applicant or staff?
I have a few questions. Mayor, would you like to go first? Go ahead. Okay.
We'll go with you first.
A few questions about this one. If you could you walk me through the process here? So let's say we approve this preliminary development agreement tonight. What happens over the next few months to a year with this project? Like, does it go back to the Planning Commission, back to the City Council? Could you walk me through that process?
Sure. So this is very preliminary. As you know, that's why it's a preliminary agreement, and it is primarily to allow the developer and help the developer in applying for tax credits in July. He has chosen to wait to follow through on formal land use approvals until after he finds out if the project is going to be awarded tax credits. Sometimes developers have done all that work first and then applied, and sometimes they do it this way. So it's his choice to do it this way. And then if he were to receive funds, he would then apply for land use entitlements, and that would be through our planning department, and it would go to the Planning Commission as well as to the council for approvals. And then at the same time, it would also come back to the HRA to negotiate a development agreement where we would hold a public hearing to sell the land, and we would make a formal commitment to that assistance. At that point, Ellers would review the current numbers and do another analysis, basically, or update their current analysis to determine that that level of funding was warranted. And at that time, we would decide sort of what form it would take.
So at that point, we would make a final decision on how much of a loan or a grant and the land write-down would occur at that time.
Exactly, yes.
And through this process, there is some community input that happens also on the project. Does that include design and use, and what does that all include?
Sure. So in order to apply for tax credits, there are some very prescribed requirements, and the developer is going through those right now. In fact, there was a meeting tonight at 5 o'clock, a virtual meeting, and members of the community were invited to provide some feedback. There was a lot of questions. I did attend, and lots of questions, and then they are invited to fill out a survey to give further feedback, and then there'll be a second meeting next week, a virtual meeting from 6 to 7:30, where the developer will respond to the things that they've heard and what they've seen in the survey. So that's very preliminary, and including they're looking for feedback specific to design. So they've reached out to members of the disability community and other communities that might benefit from the housing here, and asking them what kind of features would be important to have in this development. So that's work that's going on right now as they develop things, but then once they apply for land use approvals, there's a very formal requirement for a neighborhood meeting.
Okay.
And we would expect that to be in person at that time, so offering different forums and ways to participate. What comes before then Planning Commission and HRA is that formal public hearing process, which, as you know, is more for people to state their opinions. It's less that back and forth. That opportunity is happening right now and would happen like in the neighborhood meeting as well.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I have a bunch of questions. This is the first
okay.
development that I've approved on my time on the HRA, so I apologize for all my questions.
No, not a problem.
Are there design guidelines that govern the design of the building, the architectural design?
So exterior, sure. So the way our process works when land use approvals are applied for is our planning process is we have what's called an administrative review committee that looks at all developments from a variety of perspectives. And on that are people from a variety of disciplines, so our planners, city engineer, other people in engineering, the transportation engineer will likely look at this, given its location on a busy street. Fire takes a look at it. The building official looks at it.
But there's nothing that necessarily says you've got to have 20% this material and 20% that material.
So actually, maybe I'll turn it over to our former planner. She can talk about, there are plenty of requirements in the code, and that's all addressed through this process. But
Okay.
We aren't quite as prescriptive as some communities, but.
Yes, members of the board, the zoning code does prescribe a lot of design requirements. It talks about where your windows have to be located, how your building has to be oriented toward the street, where your parking has to be located, how much landscaping there has to be, what types of materials you can use. It is not as prescriptive as some communities, but it does absolutely have a lot of details that will inform how this building will look. We have not gotten into those details yet. We tend to wait until the formal land use application is given. This is, again, as Julie mentioned, a very preliminary step that allows the developer to move forward with the financing component. It is not related to the specifics of the design.
I realize I'm getting a little ahead of the game here. So
That's okay.
Thank you for your answers. One other question. You talk about the gap that is in the financing model. Could you just guide me through how you come to that conclusion on what the gap is? You've talked about $985,000. How do you get to that number?
So we have a formal application that we expect the developer to complete when they're asking us for financial assistance. And so Johnny submitted that application, and part of that is to submit a preliminary pro forma, what he knows at this point. And he does have pricing and puts in an estimate for, we believe the land value is around $1 million. We're still waiting for the broker price opinion to confirm that. And so all those sources and uses are plugged into a model, and then the person from Ellers takes a look at that, and he looks to see that cost per unit is similar to what other affordable developments are charging. Looks at a variety, looks at construction costs. Is that similar to what they're seeing? Ellers deals with developments across the metro area, and so they have all that data.
And they're saying this is consistent with that other data, so we're not out of line here with that number.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. And, I mean, philosophically, you could take a look at, we'll be one of the first in to this development. Sometimes in some communities wait and want to be the last in, and that's certainly a model. We have struggled really hard to get tax credits in the community, and I think Melissa and I, and in conversation with Ellers, felt and feel in this case it's important this time to try making a commitment right away in hopes that helps them to score better and helps us get a project funded.
And I agree totally with that process. I'm totally in agreement. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for your questions.
Commissioner Sobel?
So actually, I think you covered the question I had. I was going to ask about the community input process because I knew there was the meeting this evening. So I think you covered all that, and the fact that there will be some in-person meetings later. I don't know if Mr. Opara wanted to add anything about any of those meetings, or but you've answered all the questions I was going to bring up, so thank you.
Commissioner O'Leary, Hayford O'Leary.
Thank you, Chair. The question I have, so the total subsidy value of $985,000, can you talk about how that will be everything, including discounted land sales, right?
Some combination. So they specifically in their application asked for amount of tax increment, amount from the trust fund, and a write-down of $500,000. We took a look at that with Ellers, and we don't believe it's worth creating a tax increment district, especially given changes last year that affordable housing pays at a much lower tax rate, so it doesn't generate much tax increment. We know we have other resources available through our trust fund and in pooled TIF that we can transfer into the trust fund to support that. We funded the acquisition of the first property with funds from a tax increment district that closed, so it was money that we needed to use in some eligible way, or it was going to go back to the county, and we chose to have it invested in the community. So we're less concerned about paying ourselves back, and so we're going to look at all those factors before we firmly decide what form the assistance will take.
Okay, but I guess I just am curious, for my own future reference. When we incur costs, or let's say the land value goes down, that's not reflected. So when we sell the land, let's say we're sold for $1, and and it's appraised at $1 million, but we'd actually spent $1.5 million. The subsidy is the $1 million minus $1, not $1.5 million minus $1. We get the current market value, not the total that we put into it personally.
It depends who's asking the question. In the case of Minnesota Housing, they're going to look at our assistance as the amount from the appraised value. I think when we look at it as an organization, we look at our money, what we put into it. It's the cost of redevelopment. We know it costs, and that we have to subsidize that extra amount typically. So again, it depends who's asking.
Okay, no, I appreciate that answer, because it is, especially in the situation where we had to demolish the building and held it for a couple of years, it seems like, and I know we try to avoid that for,
It's,
in part, this reason, but, yeah.
you know, and if this were a market rate deal, maybe we would set things up, we'd do a tax increment district and we'd pay ourselves back, potentially. So in this case, you, the policymakers, have said that supporting affordable housing is important, and the only way to get those deals to work is to provide more upfront assistance.
Yeah. And then my only other question or concern, it specifies, and it does say approximately, but it specifies the exact number of units and parking stalls and so on, and particularly naming 14 surface parking spaces. Like the rough sketch they have, like, doesn't have any landscape buffers. I'm not clear they could actually go through planning and contain that number of parking spaces and be compliant. So is it a problem if they can actually only fit 12, or is that just a separate thing?
That'll be a separate issue. That's what was submitted in the application for financial assistance, so that's what I included here. As you know, things get adjusted, especially as they go through neighborhood meetings and get feedback and they hear from the planning commission, things will certainly get adjusted.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm supportive of this. Thank you.
Oh, Commissioner Supple.
I had one other question, and maybe this is going to come up more later when we get into the land use and the designs and things. It mentions in here that one of the groups they're going to be reaching out to are large families with children, and it also mentions that there's going to be like accessible units. Will some of the larger units be accessible, or has it been decided if which units are accessible? So like, I'm just wondering if there's going to be some flexibility on that, because I know we have more accessible units that are like one bedrooms, but if you have a family with children and one of the children needs the accessibility, you also need larger ones. Has any of that been considered, or is that part of the feedback process?
Yes, so we haven't heard that level of specificity. Our request, based on feedback that I've heard from members of the community, is that we'd like to see not just small units, but we would like to see a mix. Well, in this case, there's going to be 2 units, right? So the mix, we'll have to negotiate. But yes, I've heard that comment as well, that we'd like to see not just 1 bedrooms or studios as the accessible units. So we will push for that, at least one of those units being larger.
Thank you. I would also be in support of this preliminary development agreement. Thank you.
Question, it's in the report that was mentioned about doing environmental studies, and we know this site, of course, did at one time hold some old automotive repair services, which sometimes can lead to some issues. If environmental contamination is found, does that affect the ability to get tax credits or make financing more difficult, or not?
It's another challenge. We have already done a phase 1 and a phase 2 on this property. So I think what they would be doing would be soil borings, and we have done some of those just in spot areas. And then because we did demolition, we also had someone on site monitoring. We decided not to abate it at that time, but we did monitor what happened to that and where it might be. So we have done some of that work already, and there wasn't a major contamination, but I mean there was a little bit there just because it has been automotive. There's no avoiding it. You know, there are resources out there that you could apply for through both the county and the state, so I would envision that that's the route we would support them to take, or that we would help apply for those kinds of resources rather than, we don't anticipate that there's going to be something major that would stand in the way of things proceeding.
Okay. Maybe this goes into the too early to tell, it goes into the design guidelines. It seems like a fairly small footprint. Do you envision there will be space for landscaping? I think Commissioner Hayford O'Leary kind of touched upon this landscaping in front of the building, just to kind of soften the appearance with some greenery.
So you're right. There is not a lot of space, and maybe Johnny or one of the architects here can talk about that challenge and how they might meet that. If you want to go ahead and move to the podium and state your name for the record.
Thank you. Good evening. So in terms of, I'll let Eric speak more on design and looking to address those concerns surrounding landscaping. It is a tight site, 0.87 acres. So We are doing our best to make sure that we just had a meeting with the community to address both, the support for the project, but also any concerns surrounding everything from landscaping, potentially parking, et cetera, in that major corridor pin, and folks being able to walk safely along that. But we are at the genesis right now, so we are still working towards finding solutions. But this is a process I've been, through many times, and as we continue to go through this process, we'll be working, obviously, of course, with city leadership, the community, to make sure that we address those concerns. But if you have any comments on the design in terms of landscaping, maybe you can address that real quick.
Chair Commissioners, my name is Eric Bjorm. I'm with Pope Design Group. I am the senior project manager for this project, working with Johnny. We have started looking at designs. Obviously, the packet that you received is a pretty robust design. It's required for the application process that we're going through right now because it's competitive. We've kind of moved what seems to be the design a little bit further forward than you would normally see at this point. That's not to say some things will be modified going forward. This is a very tight site for a project like this. It has caused us to look at how parking is handled, both underground and in the surface lot. How we approach that, we have also engaged the county because of Penn Avenue, and that has affected how we are allowed to get into the site. They preferred we not provide any access or additional curb cuts on Penn, so that's why you see we're activated up on 65th. We have not gone in depth in landscaping yet. That hasn't been a part of the requirement of the application process, but that is important to us as a design group and also the developer as well. So we will be doing that as part of the process, moving this project forward. There is also a component of urban development to this project, and based on the plans that the county and the community had set forth that we looked at, there is a significant move to activate the Penn Avenue area, and so that's why you see our building up closer to the sidewalk, to the street front. That's not to say that won't be modified going forward as we move through the city engagement process and the application process. But we do want to engage that urban development concept and make sure that we activate our building with the city. So, thank you.
Great,
very
thank you.
much.
May I ask you a question?
Commissioner Young?
Thank you both for being here. Question for you. Do you anticipate this project will be similar to the one on Payne Avenue in St. Paul?
You just read my mind. It's quite similar. Payne is a major corridor, very similar to Penn. I think the difference in terms of acreage, the Hollows is 0.97 acres. This is close to 0.9. So we're going to have similar battles, trying to make sure that we can deal with, one, the setback, figure out landscaping, underground parking, surface parking, all the same challenges that we were able to find solutions on by working, one, with the city, working with the county, working with the community, and we found those solutions, and to their credit, as a collective, the Howells has been successful. So that's one of the reasons why I have a lot of confidence on this project, because of, one, where it's located, its proximity to a major highway or a major freeway, but also, two, just a similar size. And one of the comments that came up earlier today was, there's no studios here. There's no alcoves. It's just 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms. So I wanted to make that clear, just to kind of make sure that everyone understands that studios and alcoves will not be the case for this project. But in terms of the similarity, yes. The Hollows and Penn Station Apartments are very similar in terms of design and the structure.
Yeah. In that regard, and I know I'm way down the road on this, but how is that building going to wear 10 or 20 years from now, and how is it going to look, and how does it get maintained so that it continues to look good for a couple of decades? So I'll be driving around Richfield streets for a couple of decades, and I just want to make sure it still looks good.
That's a great question, Councilmember.
I think I hope a couple of decades.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think at the end of the day, our team, our philosophy is very simple. When we approach a project, we approach it with a sense where if we can't live there, then we don't want to be a part of it. We really want to make sure that we are delivering the really high-quality project development that's going to be around for generations to come, right? We're not just building box of windows. We take everything from design, the materials that are used for construction, sustainability, climate change. All of our projects have solar panels, so we're looking at this from a strategic standpoint, not just objectively, but also 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And I think also, too, I'm a long-term owner and operator, so it's not just 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. We really see that this being a project that will be for families and individuals for years to come.
So this is something you'll build and hold for a long time.
Absolutely. We're not walking away from this. Whether that be, Wayneston Commons currently under construction, in Brooklyn Center, the Hollows, and our projects in the Heights. We want to be with these communities and partner with the localities and be a partner with them for generations to come.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Supple.
I was pleased to hear you just now say that you plan to stick with the building for a long time and not just build it and sell it to someone else, because that's important to have that commitment to the community. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, any additional questions? I guess I will entertain a motion.
I will move that we adopt a resolution approving the execution and delivery of a preliminary development agreement with J.O. Companies, LLC for the development of 40 units of affordable housing on Housing and Redevelopment Authority-owned property at 6501 through 6525 Penn Avenue South.
Second.
All right, motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion from the commission? All right, I guess I just wanted to make one kind of quick comment. And for me, the project is kind of a bittersweet project in the respect that I love the project on its merits. I think it provides a lot of what Richfield needs. We need more affordable housing and deep affordability. I love the idea that it has kind of the multi-bedroom units. That's something that's very much in need in our community. I love the accessibility units, another great need that we have in the community. I'm extraordinarily impressed with the developer and the applicant. I think you have a portfolio of, well-designed buildings that complement their communities. And I think that you're an applicant that any community should be proud to work and to partner with. My one reservation is that I think a lot of people here know that I've been involved with the Penn Avenue corridor for a long time. I've served on visioning task forces in the past. And my one reservation about the project is that on the last visioning task force, which was more years than I like to even count anymore, one of the questions that came before the public and public forums was, do you want the Penn Avenue corridor to remain commercial, or would you like to see it transition to be more of a residential area? And at that time, the feeling was people wanted to see it remain commercial, and they wanted to see it to be this place that had shops, restaurants, coffee places, possibly a bakery, places that lend themselves, whether it spurs activity on the avenue and kind of liveliness on the avenue. You see people coming and going, people gather there with their family and friends. And the fact that this project is exclusively residential seems like a step away from that vision. And so in that respect, I realize that nothing in life is 100% good or 100% bad. And I think that, so this is a case of that, with all the things that I mentioned, I think are really strong points that I love about it. But, unfortunately, it takes it, the nature of residential is it's quiet. It's not, it doesn't lend itself to vibrancy and activity. It lends itself to kind of a sense of quietness. And this, of course, is a project right smack dab in the middle of that Penn Avenue corridor. I know that during the work session we had, I know that, I think someone kind of made a comment about, wow, but let's get something done. And I understand that, because nobody takes satisfaction in an empty lot and a dilapidated building, which is the former Canine College standing there. And yet it's important that we do something that's really positive for the community, because not 20 years, I mean, I expect a project like this will probably outlive every person sitting in this room. That's the nature of development. I know people say that mixed use is very challenging, and I've heard that comment enough and read that comment enough that, it's challenging as far as arranging financing, arranging a lot of logistics, and I've heard it enough where I truly do believe that's true. Of course, it's not impossible, because we see it in Richfield, we see it throughout the Twin Cities. I'll support this project tonight at this phase, but I did feel the need to, I guess, express these reservations. I don't think that this necessarily, ends this kind of vision of vibrancy of this kind of community on Penn Avenue, a place that's complementary to the surrounding neighborhood, a place that becomes a destination site, kind of maybe like East Street in Minneapolis. But I think it's once again, it's that mixed bag. It's both good because it's investment in the community, which we definitely need, but it's potentially somewhat of a step backwards, and those are my thoughts. Commissioner Hayford O'Leary.
I wasn't going to say more, but you've inspired me, Commissioner Hanson, because I will say I agree with a lot of your thinking. I really, it would be great if we could have a mixed-use project here. I'm also kind of resigned to the fact that this is probably the right thing right now. But what I do want to say, and I said this a little bit in our work session before, is that, looking at the site fit plan you have, that could result in a building that is like, well, it couldn't be an A+, because an A+ would be a great mixed-use building. It could be an A- B+, or it could be an F in terms of like how it activates that community and that thing. And unfortunately, I'd have to cite, not in terms of overall project, but in terms of design and the experience from the street, a C- or D, which would be the Novo Apartments frontage on 66th Street. Like, we asked for pedestrian entrance, and technically there's a door there. It's like a secured fire door that you need to like beep in to do it. Nobody uses it. It's a very inward-facing development. Because of the slopes, there's retaining walls. There's a lot of details about it that make it not great. And I guess what I want to say is that in light of the fact that mixed use is not viable, I do expect really good urban design that contributes to this walkable business district that we want, which means a front door that people are really using, that is designed not just for people to go straight into the parking ramp and leave in their car. Good frontage, and the reference to the Payne Avenue thing is great, because I think that is a good project, and I would love to see something like that. And again, to be considerate of that parking lot frontage, which was one of my concerns before. And just one thing to put on the applicants and staff's radar, I know we normally require sidewalks on all frontage for apartments. I expect that we do that, and I would ask that they consider the slopes of that street and consider how it might one day be extended by the city further. That was a recommendation from the Planning Commission recently, that the city potentially extend sidewalks to more logical terminuses. So I just want to be sure that whatever happens with this project sets us up for success on that street and in general in the Penn Avenue corridor. So I hope that this is the B+, A- thing that is not itself the perfect walkable business district, but contributes to what we want to see. And I think it will be a step in the right direction for that.
Okay, any final thoughts? All right, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. That brings us to staff report number 13.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. I will ask Economic Development Manager Jan Youngquist to present the staff report.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and Commission members. The property at 101 66th Street East was first vacated in 2013. After 3 years of neglect, it was purchased for redevelopment by PLH and Associates in 2016. After many years of work, the city approved plans for a 42-unit mixed-use building in October 2020, and the HRA approved a contract for private development to provide financial assistance in the form of tax increment in January 2021. Shortly thereafter, PLH and Associates sold the property to 101 East 66th Street LLC. I'll refer to them as the developer. The developer presented new plans for an 80-unit, 5-story mixed-use building, which were approved by the City Council in January 2022. In June 2022, the HRA approved a contract for private development and issuance of a tax increment financing note for up to $2.3 million. Increases in construction and labor costs as well as rising interest rates impacted the developer's budget. Ellers, the HRA's financial consultant, reviewed the developer's revised project finances. Based on Ellers' analysis, the HRA approved an amended and restated contract for private development and issuance of a TIF note for up to $2.685 million in June 2023. The contract required the construction commence by December 31st, 2023, and be substantially complete by December 31st, 2025. The building permit has been approved, is ready to be issued, but economic conditions have continued to create challenges for financing the project. In December 2023, the HRA approved an amendment to the contract which extended the date to commence construction by 90 days, with the ability of the HRA director to extend an additional 90 days. Because the developer had received demolition permits for the existing structures on the site and indicated that they would be removed by the April 9th, 2024 deadline given by the City Council in a separate land use extension approval, in March of this year, the HRA Executive Director extended the deadline to commence construction to June 28th, 2024. The developer is exploring several options, including bringing in a partner to help finance the project. Discussions are ongoing, and staff is recommending an extension to the contract to allow these discussions to continue. The attached resolution proposes extending the deadline to commence construction to September 30th, 2024. Failure to extend the contract would require the developer or a new developer to begin the approval process anew. Delays will continue to reduce the amount of tax increment that will be available to the project, making redevelopment that much more difficult. The proposal remains in compliance with the goals of the comprehensive plan, and staff believes that helping this particular project move forward remains the best option for the community and the immediate neighborhood. With that, I would take any questions you may have.
All right, any questions from the HRA? Commissioner Supple.
I had some timing questions. So you're saying if we vote against this tonight, someone would have to start over with the land use approvals. And then elsewhere it says that we need to have substantial construction started by, I believe, March of 2025. Is that correct? So is there any chance that we could get through land use approvals in that point, or?
So there's so many dates flying around and a couple of different processes. The March 16th date, it's not substantial construction, it's site improvements, and that's related to the TIF. There are separate dates related to the land use entitlements. So the land use entitlements were extended until January of 2025 to begin construction. So we've got kind of different dates out there.
So, okay, that makes sense. I guess my question is, if we vote for this, then hopefully something will come about before those land use and TIF requirements expire. But if for some reason we would decide not to renew this, realistically, is there going to be time for a new developer to go through a project and all that land use stuff before the TIF agreement that has to take place by March 16th would expire? I mean, realistically, how long does it take to go through land use? I was trying to juggle all the dates.
Sure. Great question. It's unlikely that somebody could get through a land use entitlement process. I think the assumption would be if a new developer came in, and so there would have to be an agreement to potentially sell the property to a new developer and go through the entitlement process, so that's a bit tricky. So that's why we're trying to provide an extension to help this project stay afloat.
If I'll just add that if you were not to approve this tonight, this contract would expire on June 28th of this month. It is unlike, there cannot be substantial construction to keep this agreement in place by June 28th. That's just not possible. And so if you were not to approve this tonight, the agreement to provide tax increment to a developer for this project goes away. It isn't assigned to a new developer. The district is still alive, but technically, that's just a technicality. What we would do then is decertify this district. There would not be time to create a whole new development agreement. What we're doing here by suggesting giving this additional 3 months is suggesting that perhaps a new developer will come in, want to purchase the development or partner, and we will have time to assign the existing agreement to that new developer. Is that helpful?
Yes, that helps a lot.
Sure.
Commissioner Young.
Have you received other interest in developing the parcel from anybody? Has a developer approached you and said, we want to build a new building there?
You want to take that?
Thank you. Good question. The property is owned by the developer. It is not owned by the HRA. So developers wouldn't be approaching us to say that they were interested. They would approach the developer. We have had questions about what's happening. We have provided the developer's information to people who were asking what's happening with the project. So we believe that there have been inquiries. But again, they wouldn't approach us. They would approach the developer directly.
And has the tax increment district clock started such that the amount of increment available to the developer is declining as we speak?
Yes, the district was certified in March of 2021, and so that clock is ticking.
That clock is ticking. And if you decertify it and then set up a new tax increment district, does it restore to the original value of the first TIF district?
One of the challenges of decertifying and then creating a new TIF district is we would not be able to create a redevelopment TIF district because the buildings are gone. So there is a blight test and a coverage test that needs to be met in order to create a redevelopment TIF district.
So there's a strong motivation to stick with this and try to get this one done, right?
Correct, yeah. We could establish a housing TIF district, but there are larger affordability requirements with a housing TIF district.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no further questions, is there a motion?
I will make a motion to adopt the resolution approving an extension of the amended and restated contract for private development with 101 East 66th Street LLC.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Okay. All right, all in favor of the motion presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Well, that will bring us to our HRA discussion items. Any topics from any of the commissioners? Commissioner Supple.
I had a question for Executive Director Palman, but if you're already going to talk about this in your Executive Director's report, please tell me to wait and I'll listen to it then. I was just wondering about an update on the parcel of land over by the underpass that we've been working on. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Supple. Actually, I'm going to ask Jan Youngquist to give an update on that velodrome proposal. She has been working with the developer on that.
Thank you for the question. First off, we did close on the donation of the property at 1620 to 1640. So the HRA now has full ownership of the 3.7 acres. With regard to the velodrome project, we had entered into an escrow deposit letter agreement with the Minnesota Cycling Center last September. And that was as they were looking to the legislature to help provide financial funding for the project. And as we know, there was no bonding bill, and so the project did not receive funding. The way that the escrow deposit letter was written was that it gave them time until after the legislative session for us to enter into a preliminary development agreement with them by June 14th of this year. The way it was written is that if that wasn't able to occur, that the letter would be void. So we did refund them the balance of the escrow. However, I had a really good conversation with the developer. They are still interested in the project. They fully understand that we can't necessarily hold it exclusively for them. And so what we have committed to do is we're going to have monthly check-in calls where I'll let them know what's going on with the property, and they'll keep us apprised on their plans.
Thank you, that was very helpful.
All right, any additional topics? All right, hearing none, we'll move to the Executive Director's report.
Thank you. My exciting news was that we had closed on the property, so we just covered that. I don't have anything further to report.
All right, that will bring us to claims then. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve the claims.
And a second?
Second.
All right, a motion has been made and seconded. All say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and that brings us to the end of our business, so the meeting will stand adjourned.